Diane began fishing the Gulf Coast when she was 8 years old, and by 24 had become a boat captain. In 1989, when her home of Calhoun County was listed as the #1 toxic polluter in the country, she organized a meeting to protest what chemical plants were doing to the bays. And so began her life as an environmental activist that continues to this day, despite great personal risk. Diane has been jailed 20 times for acts of civil disobedience. As a result, she has created the Texas Jail Project, or as she puts it, Change Up the Lockup, an initiative to improve conditions and treatment of people incarcerated in Texas jails. She's been called an eco-terrorist and a dangerous woman because she has no fear of retaliation. A district attorney once asked her how the courts and the justice system could make her stop fighting. And Diane told him there wasn't a thing they could do to stop me. Diane's work on behalf of the people and aquatic life of Seadrift, Texas, has won her a number of awards, including the Bioneers Award. She is the co-founder of Code Pink and continues to lead the fight for social justice. Diane Wilson.
Howdy, y'all. It's wonderful being here. I was here a couple of weeks ago at the Working Men's Water Festival in New Bedford, and a lot of fishermen there. And I guess y'all know I'm a shrimper. I've been a shrimper since I was 8 years old, and I don't know whether a lot of y'all know what a shrimper is, but a couple of years ago I was doing one of my many hunger strikes, and I was on a hunger strike against DuPont. And I took my hunger strike to DuPont's headquarters, which was in Delaware. So I was sitting in front of DuPont's headquarters. I had a little chair right across the road, and here comes a newspaper, and they did a story on me, and it said, shrimper on a hunger strike. And the next day, this carload of guys came by, and they said, "Where's that stripper on the hunger strike?" So I just want y'all to know, in case y'all misread it, that I'm the shrimper and not the stripper. But anyway, and I know with this title about misbehaving, I know most people, and I know because I've had a lot of people come up to me, and they believe that I come by this naturally, that I'm just a little troublemaker. I've been it all my life, and that all I do is try to sit around and channel Mother Jones, and I really don't, because, like I said, I have been our family has been 100 years in one little bitty town that's got 1,000 peoples, and it is still 1,000 peoples there. And I've been, and my family has been 4 generations of shrimpers, so I have been on the water since I was 8 years old, and I was a strangely quiet little kid. And matter of fact, I remember quite well my mom always going up to my dad and said, "Something's the matter with that girl." And because I used to avoid people, I would hide underneath the bed, I would climb out the windows. When I was in school, I took speech all the way up to the 6th grade because I refused to talk, and just certain, like half the alphabet just blanked out on me, and I just so I refused to talk. And so it's probably that reason why I was such a good shrimper, because to be a shrimper, you really have to love silence. And I loved the silence, and I loved the bay. And matter of fact, I got Pentecostal holy rollers on one side of my family, speaking in tongues, snake handling, that type of stuff. And then on the other side is my grandfather, who was a Cherokee Indian. And so I had a tendency to see visions. And I remember when I was a little kid, I could go out to the bay, and I could really see the bay. And she was a woman, in case y'all was thinking she was a man, but she is a woman, and she's kind of old, and she had this beautiful long gray hair, and I remember her dress went all the way out in the water, and I loved going down to that bay because that old woman was down there, and she really liked me. And I'm coming from the South, where the thing I heard most in my life was "you stupid women." And so there was no place like going to the bay where you were loved. And so I have always had a vision, and I always knew the bay was alive. I didn't need to be told that. And it was great sitting in that workshop yesterday about the Gaia principle, that it is alive. And it's like, yeah, I knew that one. And so anyway, I've spent my whole life being a very quiet person. I had 5 kids. I had absolutely no money, because in case anybody thinks shrimpers make money, no, they do not. Most of them live in trailers, and they got old rusty trucks. But it is their identity. It is who they are. And so not too long, probably around I was 40 years old, So if y'all ever think 40's too old, that's when it can start, right there. But anyway, I was 40 years old. Thank you. So you older women out there, 40's a good year. So anyway, here I was, 40 years old, 5 kids. Shrimping is so bad that I'm running this fish house. And I had this, one of my shrimpers, he came by and he brought me this newspaper article that said it was the first time the toxic release inventory ever came out. And our county, Calhoun County, and it's 15,000 people in the entire county. So it's a tiny little county, but we were like number 1 in the nation for toxic disposal to the land. And I think we're like 3rd place in air emissions, and we were placing like 5th in injection wells, where you poke the waste down into the ground as far as you can put it. And we were placing all over the place, and it just blew my mind. And normally, I don't talk. I never had a meeting in my entire life. There is nobody that I care to talk to. And when I saw when I saw that, I did something. It pushed me to do something I never did. And all I did was call a meeting. That's all I did. So a lot of people coming to me and says, well, what do I need to do to get started? And I said, all you got to do is pick up the phone and call a meeting. Because sometimes that's as small as it takes. And anyway, I guess it was the backlash from that simple meeting, just asking for it. I didn't even have it. I just asked for it. And within a week, I don't know if y'all know anything about a fish house. Go down the docks and take a look. And it's, you don't see a lot of people in suits. You don't see a lot of bank presidents wandering around. You don't see economic development or chamber of commerce running down. But anyway, within a week, I had economic development down at the fish house. I had the bank president. I had never seen that man in my life, and suddenly there he was. I got the chamber of commerce down there. The senator from the state of Texas sent his aide down there, and they all just wanted to know. They said, was I a little renegade environmental group trying to roast industry alive? And I'm like, what? Because I knew absolutely zero about the environment. I didn't know what the state environmental agency was. I didn't know where the EPA was. I didn't know what wastewater permits were. I didn't even know the names of the industry in my county. That's how stupid I was. Anyway, so even though I got all of these people that were wanting me to be a good citizen, just be a good citizen, Diane, I was very polite, because I was always a real polite, quiet little person, and I said, well, I wouldn't have it at the city hall, but I'd move it to the schoolhouse. And I had my first meeting there, and the thing of it is I found out real quick what the deal was, why everybody was so upset. It's because our little county, already number 1, we were fixing to get the biggest chemical development Texas ever had. And in case y'all think we do things small in Texas, I can tell you we don't. We do them as big as we can down there. And it was the biggest Texas had ever had. It was 2 billion worth of a chemical expansion, PVC, polyvinyl chloride, gives you cancer of the liver, you name it, and it gives it to you. And it was bringing the worst polluter in the country. Matter of fact, they had been kicked out of Taiwan. It was Formosa Plastics. And I don't know whether y'all know anything about Taiwan at that time, but that was when they still had military rule, and the Kuomintang was still in control, and they kicked them out, and Texas brought them in. And that's how bad they were. And matter of fact, we not only brought them in, it's Louisiana was fighting with us over it, and we got them because we gave them $250 million worth of tax abatements. And so anyway, here you have, this is what you're up against. It's, you got a $2 billion chemical expansion coming in. You got a man that's running for president, Phil Graham. He was running for president, and he was getting all the credit for bringing all those jobs. 1,500 jobs were coming with that chemical plant. And guess who was the EPA that was going to rubber stamp those little permits? Well, it was Phil Graham's campaign manager. That's who it was. And so when you start fighting a chemical company that's a known polluter and you know exactly what they're going to do to that bay, and when you have already been promised, because this is what they did, the EPA had already promised them, don't worry about federal regulations, don't worry about that National Environmental Policy Act, you know, we're going to cut your permits in time, we're going to give you all your men visas, you just come on down here. And so, and then not only that, you've got every single council person, mayor, senator, they all had contracts with the company. They were going to be security contracts, they were going to be construction contracts, they were going to be cement contracts. I mean, everybody in that entire county, it was a bonanza. And so when I dared to say, oh, wait a minute. Well, first of all, I was a woman, right? I was a fisherwoman. I was a woman with 5 kids, and it was like, no, this isn't what it looks like. They said I was a spy from Louisiana to derail it. She ain't really what she seems. And then after a while, when they figured out that I wasn't a spy from Louisiana, you know, they figured, well, dang, there must be a smart man behind her, because we know those stupid women in Seadrift, you know, they ain't got sense to get out of a paper sack. So, you know, so they were totally confused over what I was doing. And the thing about it is, you know, probably my biggest illusion that was burst, thank God, is I believe, like most people, is that the state agencies, your political leaders, the federal government is going to take care of it. You know, I can't tell you how many meetings I had, and I had a room full almost as big as this, and it was all workers from the plant that were in the audience, and they were sitting out there, and they said, why don't you just leave the business, this to the business who are supposed to take control of it, you know? Because they really do. They believe there's agencies out there taking control of it, taking care of it. If there's fines, if there are violations, they're going to take care of it. I remember one of my first little eye-openers is I finally found out where the district office was, which was down in Corpus Christi. So I went down to Corpus Christi, and I decided I better know about these plants. So I wanted to go through their files. And I had these state environmental investigators. They were just sitting there watching me. And I was in there 3 or 4 hours. And after a while, one of them came, come here. And he pulled me in the back room, and he said, and he gave me all of these documents about contamination that they knew about, and they couldn't do anything with it. Because, matter of fact, their district officer wanted a job with Formosa, and besides all the politics, they couldn't even get it up. It was like a bottleneck. And he said, you do something with this, because we can't do a thing with it. And so anyway, that's where I started finding out, is that when you work, and I'm talking about Texas, and I think it applies more places than you think. When you work inside the box, going after their permits, writing your congressman, doing the petitions where they, I found out real fast, it don't matter. In Texas, it did not matter. They were going to get it. And as a matter of fact, I worked a year and a half just doing the regular stuff, and I remember there was finally a leak from the EPA, and it said that Formosa was going to get all their permits, and they weren't going to have to do any studies, and no permit hearings, none of that stuff. And I had this very savvy Houston environmentalist, and he came and he said, well, Diane, he says, it was a sweetheart deal. It was a done deal. And he said, but he patted me on the shoulder. He said, you've done a good job. Just pat yourself on the shoulder. You nothing to be ashamed of. And just give it up. Because he said, there's nothing left to do. And I can remember that day. I remembered what she was like. And I was like, nope, not getting it. And he was like, well, there ain't nothing you can do. And I was like, and right off the top of my head, because I'd never thought of this before in my life. I mean, off the top of my head, I said, well, I'm going to do a hunger strike. And he was like, he said, Diane, he said, people in Texas don't do hunger strikes. And they don't, generally they don't. I mean, he says, they might do it if you was a kind of a nut from California. They kind of expect it. I mean, India, they do hunger strikes. He says, but in Texas, we do not do hunger strikes. And I said, I don't care. I'm doing a hunger strike. And I did. And I think I was kind of floored him with my conviction on it. And the thing of it is, though, I'm real savvy about my own inner demons. And so I knew if I didn't do that hunger strike that day, if I went home and thought about it, that little linear side of your brain, you start hearing your mama's voice in your head, and you start hearing, the state senator's head, and you start hearing all this noise, and it's like, oh, you better not do that, going to get repercussions on that one. And I knew if I went home and slept on it, I would wake up the next morning and say, thank God I didn't do that crazy stunt. And so what I did is I went to a phone as fast as I could find one, and I called up the only reporter that I knew, and I said, I'm starting a hunger strike. And she said, well, when? And I said, I'm doing it right now. And I did. I started right then. And I did. And the only thing is I was so stupid about hunger strikes is I started my first hunger strike on a shrimp boat in the bay. And this was before the cell phones, so I was doing a hunger strike and nobody knew about it. And the only one who knew about it was the chemical company I was opposing. And every morning when I was on that shrimp boat, here come Formosa Plastics in their little black car, and all these men, about 7 men in suits, come out on my boat, and they look at me and they said, Diane, you just don't know how stupid you look out here. And I was like, I don't care. I'm doing a hunger strike. And I did. I did. And the weird thing is in 2 weeks, I only did this one in 2 weeks, I got exactly what I was asking for. So anyway, it was just a real little light that went off in my head, and it said something about commitment, because I really believe, I know even Gandhi, he said, anybody, and I do mean anybody, can do what he did given the level of commitment. And I just think we have no idea what that commitment is. If we do it a weekend, it's like, well, my gosh, we didn't accomplish nothing. It's like, I'm depressed. Well, I'm telling you, I'm going to tell you a little secret. It really is, it's a secret. It's like a key to the universe. And it's like you walk out to that edge, and it's yourself you put at risk. Because I know one time one of my actions was I took my own shrimp boat out to sink it. And I was going to sink it right on top of their discharge pipe. And the thing is when I first thought about sinking something, because I had already did 3 hunger strikes, I was like, and I was really outraged. And it's like, I need to sink something. And you know what? At first I was thinking, because, in Texas, there's a lot of barge traffic and ships. And I was like, I wonder if I could sink one of those barges. But you know what? I knew I had to sink my own boat. Because that's where it happens. When you take something you value, when you put yourself out there, that's when it happens. And I guarantee you, I was fighting for most. I was trying to get them to recycle their waste stream. It was almost a $2 billion chemical expansion. They were going to have like 15 million gallons per day of toxic waste going into my bay. And so I was trying to get them to do zero discharge, which was the original Clean Water Act, 0 emissions. So I was just asking what the law said. And anyway, the first time I started asking about zero discharge, they were looking at me like I was crazy, and they're like, there's no such thing as zero discharge. And I stayed after it, and by 5 years, they were like, well, yeah, there is, but we just can't afford it. So anyway, after 3 hunger strikes, and a couple of them were 30 days, the last one, that's when I decided I need to sink that boat. And I did. But because, and the thing of it is when you have been so long on the water, and my family's been on the water 100 years now, one little place. We got a sense of place. It's real important. And I remember when when you start valuing your boat or the bay, there's no comparison. There's no comparison. Although most people think, me sinking that boat was kind of like the equivalent of a farmer burning his farm. But it was no question. But, shrimpers dearly love their boats. They really do. And I really love that boat. It was a 42-foot shrimp boat named CB. I just love that boat. But before I sunk it, I painted the whole thing a virgin white. I said it was going to be a virgin white, and I'm going to sink it virgin white. And I did. And so I proceeded to take the engine out of the shrimp boat because, if I sunk my shrimp boat, and it's got a big diesel engine, if I sunk the shrimp boat on top of their illegal discharge pipe, you know what they were going to say? That woman's a polluter. That's what she is. And so I knew I had to take I had to take the engine out. So I took the engine out, and I painted it white, and so I got a shrimper to drag me out in the middle of the night and undercover, because it was subversive, and that corporations, I'm gonna tell you a little trick they have, is when a corporation finds someone's opposing them, they figure out, it's like, okay, who's their people? Is it a school teacher? Is it school people? Is it, and with me as a fisherwoman, it's the fishing people. All right, we need to lasso in the fishing people. So they got my cousin, who was the spokesperson for all the fishermen in the county, and they hired him to be a consultant for $65,000 a year. And so they kind of lassoed in the fishermen, and all my cousin had to do was keep track of me and tell them what I was doing. So naturally, when I painted a boat, removed the motor, half the shrimpers down there, what in the hell is she doing? And so anyway, when they started seeing that motor being removed, my cousin naturally went to Formosa. It's like, she's taken the motor out of her boat. And so Formosa alerted the Coast Guard. And so here it was midnight in the middle of the bay. I have, and it was one of these freak storms. I think it just was aware of all the trauma going on. So it boiled up this huge storm out in the middle of the bay. And right in the middle of it was 3 boatloads of Coast Guard. And all they wanted to know is where that eco-terrorist was who was sinking her shrimp boat. And you know, the funny thing is, though, is up to that point, I had really, really had a tough time with the shrimpers because most of them, it's a dying industry. They're very depressed. They're just, you know, and it's like they see me coming, it's like, oh, Diane, don't talk to us. Don't talk to us. We're just depressed. We're depressed people. And so I had a heck of a time ever getting them to help me on anything. But I do know when I took that shrimp boat out to sink it on top of that discharge pipe, and there was 3 boatloads of Coast Guard, and I mean the big cutters. I'm not talking the little roustabout. I mean the big one. And those shrimpers were sitting there watching all this antics and these boats going around and around, Coast Guards with their bullhorns calling this Wilson. So, you know, those shrimpers, you know, and you know, they're really kind of conservative folks, and they were just sitting there watching because they were on the docks and they could see this out in the middle of the bay. And what happened was every one of those shrimpers got in their boats and they went out and did a demonstration in front of that dang company. Yeah. And anyway, so I want you to know right after that, that's when Formosa gave me zero discharge, you know, which is recycling their waste stream. And I know, oh yeah, it's 5 minutes. And I want you to know that people say, oh yeah, Diane, but that was 5 years, 3 hunger strikes. You sunk your boat. Husband divorced you. Yes, he did. And there's like, oh, that's bad payoff. And I want you to know is the next month after I got zero discharge from Formosa Plastics, I just walked right over to Alcoa Aluminum. I didn't even call up that plant manager. I just walked right in his office and I said, well, do we do this zero discharge thing or do we do this other thing? And he gave me zero discharge in about 15 minutes. Thank you. So I just want you folks to know that, you know, and it's the title of my book. It's a misquote from George Bernard Shaw, and it's a reasonable woman adapts to the world, but an unreasonable woman makes the world adapt to her. So I'm encourage all you women to really just misbehave. Thank you.
Wow, so we've had a pirate and a dangerous woman. I like the direction we're going in here. Okay, we're going to give you a break, a 15-minute break. Before you go, just a huge round of applause, please, for our sponsors. The Coalition for Buzzards Bay, the Women's Fund, NRDC, Southeastern Environmental Education Alliance, Baker Books, Maggie's, The Artisan Kitchen, Great Hill Blue, Green Shuttle of Cape Cod, Organic Valley, Glee Gum, Equal Exchange, Late July, TS Designs, Cape Cod Potato Chips, BioTour, Starbucks, and Whole Foods. Take 15 minutes. Please stop by the Marion Institute booth and sign up for your audios of all the plenary speakers.